亲爱的全球观众听众，今天是美国东部时间2024年2月5号。那么今天来到了这个美国的佛罗里达的肯尼迪航天中心，这里也是美国 NASA 美国航天局所在地。今天这个学到很多东西啊，大家看了没有？我后面这个火箭就是登月火箭，阿波罗登月火箭。你看它这个有多粗，它像一个篮球场一样粗。大家看后面有多长，像足球场一样长，篮球场一样粗，足球场一样长。登月火箭，这个人类啊，在1968年就登月了。我们这个中国当然慢慢的也快要登月，但是今天学了很多东西，很受教育。那么我从刚开始导游做介绍的时候我就拍了。今天李毅摄影给大家看一个李毅摄影的纪录片，就是美国佛罗里达奥兰多美国肯尼迪航天中心美国宇航局所在地整个的这么一个一个旅行的这么一个摄影。那么下面就是开始给大家播放，希望大家喜欢，谢谢大家，也祝大家这个龙年吉祥，身体愉快，阖家欢乐，这个不要失业，多多赚钱，谢谢大家。现在来到这个美国佛罗里达的肯尼迪航天中心这是航天中心，这是美国总统肯尼迪讲话。
He says, we're going to put a man on the moon and return him home safely in that decade. And when the engineers heard that, they weren't very pleased with that. They're like, you got to be kidding me. We've sent one man from here 300 miles to the Bahamas, and now this guy wants us to put someone on the moon. And to give you all a little perspective about what a big leap that is, this rocket right there is 88 feet tall. The Saturn V that takes us to the moon, 363 feet tall, 4 times higher than that rocket. That one weighed 66,000 pounds. The Saturn V, 6.2 million pounds. So just getting something that much bigger off the ground, that would have been enough for a lot of people. And I'm a communicator with the Kennedy Space Center representing NASA. How many of you here are here for your very first time? Okay, me too. Yeah, so. This tour, it's going to last about 1 hour and 45 minutes. And then at the end of the tour, we will drop you off at the Apollo Saturn V Center, and that's where you can see a real Saturn V rocket, the one that took us to the moon. You'll be able to stay out there as long as you like, and then you will follow a little path when you come out of the gift shop, and you get on a bus like this one. It's going to take you back here. If you have not yet been inside of Atlantis, when you do get back later on, you go right underneath the orange tank there into that building. And then you follow a little ramp up to the top. They show a film about how we designed and built the shuttle. And after that, when the doors open up, you'll see the real Space Shuttle Atlantis. So you don't want to miss that. So give yourself enough time to see that. There are a couple of things while we're on the bus. Please remain seated when the bus is in motion for your safety. Also, if you're having conversations, try and keep them down to a whisper so everyone can hear the conversation going on. Also, photos. You can take photos wherever we go today, with just one little exception. When we go through the security gate in a couple of minutes, there is no photos allowed at the gate or any of the personnel there. All right. We're going to make 2 stops today where we can get off the bus, look around, see some great things, take a lot of great photos. And then as far as questions go, I'll try and answer any questions you have, but we always request hold the questions until we're at one of those stops, because if people are asking questions, it's a rolling tour, we're going past other stuff, then I got to try and play catch up, I get confused, and then we got to come all the way back here and start all over, and we don't have to do that. All right, We're going to get underway in just a minute. Our tour escort today is Jody. She'll be on the bus in a second, and she'll take us out to all of these great places. But the few things I want to mention as we start is to keep in mind that this is what we call an active spaceport. So we have a route where we follow every day, and sometimes we have to make some changes to that route based on the work that's been going on down here. So right now we have an all clear, but we get all clears all the time, and then we still encounter different things that happen along the way there. And the other thing, you're probably aware, we call it a multi-user spaceport, and that's just how we say it's not just NASA launching rockets. SpaceX has launched 6 times since the 1st of January. They had 68 launches last year. They've got a rocket going up. It's actually tomorrow morning, 1:33 a.m. It's a NASA launch of a PACE satellite that is going to be doing a lot of charting, ecological stuff, mostly based on the oceans and getting all sorts of readings about everything down in the ocean. So it's a pretty big deal launch. They say it's got a 40% chance weather-wise of going tonight. That doesn't sound too good, but these things change all the time. We've seen it go from 40 all the way up to 80, 90%. And we've also seen it go the other way. So Florida weather changes very quickly. So this is Jody. She's going to take us to every place we go. Everyone say good afternoon. Okay. All right, so we're ready when you are. Okay. Now, besides SpaceX, we have Blue Origin. Did you see all the big blue buildings when you came in? Yeah, that's Blue Origin. So that's Jeff Bezos, Amazon. And they are working on a rocket there called the New Glenn. They're hoping to launch it sometime later this year. It's a pretty big rocket. It is 280 feet tall. So if we compare that to the Falcon 9 that SpaceX launches is 230 feet. So it's pretty large, 50 feet taller. And it will be reusable, just like the Falcon 9 and the Falcon Heavy rocket. They were supposed to be moving something out of those buildings this morning, working their way down towards Cape Canaveral. And they told us this morning that the road we're going to be going on would be closed for about a half an hour. But we didn't encounter that, so we don't know if they delayed it or what. But anyway, a lot of work going on over there. Then there's another company. This one is called Relativity Space. They had their first ever launch last March. The rocket they launched was 85% made with a 3D printer. Wow. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. They're working on the replacement for that one already, which will be 100% with a 3D printer. So yeah, really mind-blowing stuff they're doing. If they're able to do that, and they did get the proof of concept when they launched in March, it'll bring the cost of rocket launches way down. So that's a good thing. Now, besides all these other companies, we cannot forget about NASA. They have a new program. It's called Artemis. That's the mission to go back to the moon and then on from the moon to Mars. Artemis 1 launched a year ago in November. It was a test flight of the new rocket, which is called Space Launch System, SLS for short. On top of it was the Orion capsule, brand new capsule for astronauts. So Artemis 1 was a test mission, no astronauts on board, and it went very well. Splashed down outside of San Diego, California after a 25-day mission around the moon. And they're still finishing up the analysis of that, getting ready for Artemis 2. Out to your right here, in that parking lot just ahead, is a Mercury Redstone rocket. The Mercury Redstone rocket, that is the type of rocket that Alan Shepard went up on May 5th of 1961. Alan Shepard was the first American to go into space. He went only 116 miles straight up, then he made a big arc and he splashed down near the Bahamas. And his whole flight was 15 minutes. That was it. 15 minutes, up and down. No one in the country cared. They were just like thrilled. The U.S. finally got someone up into space. And the engineers, the guys that launched it, they were so happy. It went so well. They are celebrating, right? Patting themselves on the back that we have not yet invented. So a pretty wild, goal to set. Now, we are on our way to an area called the KSC, Kennedy Space Center. Everything's an acronym here. So the KSC Industrial Area. And the industrial area, that's where NASA does a lot of their pre-flight work and their post-flight analysis. All that is done in this area. Now, our Artemis 1 rocket and Artemis 2 and 3, are going to be 322 feet tall. Artemis 4 is going to be 365 feet tall. So when we launched the rocket, we built it on a mobile launch platform, a platform with a big tall tower. So for Artemis 4, we need a taller tower. And what they're doing is, in these white huts we're coming up to here, they are staging all of those supplies while they come into the Kennedy Space Center. They keep them there. Then as we're ready to assemble them, they're moving them down to the other end, to the assembly area. They only started this probably 4 months ago now. This was just all an empty area right here. And in the, I think it's still in there, in this last white hut, if you look back into it, you'll see one of the segments of, yeah, it's there. One of the segments of the tower right in there. So they'll have a big flatbed, bring it on down right there. Now, at this intersection we're coming up to, just off on the left-hand side of the road there, that hedge, if you were able to stand in front of it, you see it spells out the word NASA. And the hedge was donated to us by Walt Disney back in the 1960s. He was a very big fan of space. This area here, all this ground, was where NASA's original headquarters was kept. A few years ago, they went ahead and knocked it down. And then they built this new building here. This is the new NASA headquarters building. It is environmentally friendly, very energy efficient, all that type of stuff. It is 7 floors high right now. Each floor is named after one of our planets. So yeah, originally it was 8 floors high, but then we decided Pluto wasn't a planet. They had to knock that whole floor off. So a lot of extra work they did on it. Now, the next building we're coming up to, this next intersection, if you look down that roadway there, that's where the Orion 1 capsule is, about a quarter of a mile down the road. That's where they're doing all that analysis. This building, though, from behind the trees, this brick building, is called the SSPF, Space Station Processing Facility. That's where they got everything ready. When we built the International Space Station, they brought all the parts up inside the space shuttle. That's where they got them all processed and ready to go to the shuttle. And now that the space station is operational, they have between 200 to 300 different experiments going on up at the space station at any one time. All of it, they get ready right inside there. Last summer they brought up new solar panels. Right in that building's where they did all that. And right on the other side of that building, there's an empty lot. And so far I know you're thinking, first he's pointing out a hedge, now he's pointing out an empty lot. Well, that empty lot back in the late 60s and 70s is where the Apollo astronauts practiced driving the Lunar rover, the vehicle they drove on the moon. So they would be driving around there. They also would practice using all the tools they would use to collect all the samples up on the moon. And we actually saw a really cool picture. There's a bus tour here, but from like 1970. And the bus tour pulled right up, and there are the Apollo astronauts working right there, and the bus is right up close. Security's a lot different now. You can't get close to something like that now. We are on our way, heading down towards Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and that's where NASA did all the early launches. Our Mercury launches, our Gemini launches, and then even the early Apollos launched from there. That is currently where all the private companies launch from. SpaceX, ULA, Blue Origin, Relativity, they all launch from down on that site right there. SpaceX has 2 sites. They launch from, we've had roughly 250 launches from the Kennedy Space Center since the mid-1960s. Down here at Cape Canaveral, somewhere close to 8,000 launches. A lot of them were military, and we don't have access to all that data, so that's our estimate, somewhere around that timeline. Now, we're not allowed to go into Cape Canaveral because it's a military base, and one day Jody kind of ticked them off and they don't let us in there anymore. So we're going to get close to it though, and then she'll make a U-turn, and we'll pause for a minute, and I'll point out some of the launch pads, what they're doing now, a little bit of the history of some of those different launch pads. Coming up here on your left-hand side, you'll see this waterway, and this is called the Banana River. If you look at it from overhead, it looks like a banana, so that's why they call it that. Now, We got to clear over on this side of the Banana River. If you look out that way, you can see several cruise ships parked there. That is Port Canaveral Cruise Terminal. Right on the other side of those cruise ships is where Cape Canaveral starts. So SpaceX, the Falcon 9 rocket, most of the time it will land out on a drone ship in the ocean. Sometimes it lands here at Cape Canaveral. But when it lands on a drone ship, it comes in right next to those cruise ships. So if you were ever taking a cruise from Port Canaveral, once you get on the ship, if you walk to the other side and look down, a lot of times you see a Falcon 9 rocket laying there. Yeah, and down in that section there, between the cruise ships and up to this road we're on now, that's where some of the early launches went from. The Alan Shepard launch on Launchpad number 14, John Glenn off of 19, all that down in that general direction right there. This is a drawbridge that we're going over here. The very big parts of the rockets, like the orange tank we saw when we left, stage 1 of the Saturn V, the core stage of Artemis, they come up on a barge on the Banana River through the drawbridge up to the assembly area. Oh, these bleachers over here, the grandstands out there on your left, those are for employees of the NASA, the families of the NASA employees for the big launches like Apollo, Space Shuttle, Artemis. They would give the NASA employee a pass, and they'd say, give this to your family, it's good for 1 carload to bring in. Well, what they started doing during Apollo and the Space Shuttle, the people started renting RVs and bringing 40, 50 people in at a time. So now when we got to Artemis last year, they said, okay, here's your parking pass, 7 people maximum. So they cut it out. Because even with the 7 people maximum, this from the bridge up ahead there, all the way to the other side of that other bridge was just packed with family members and things like that. That is Launchpad number 36. That's going to be used by Blue Origin. Jeff Bezos' rocket, the New Glenn, is going to launch right from there sometime this year. It's been out there. They've done testing on the engines, and that's where it will launch from. They have not yet used that pad. New Glenn or anything from Blue Origin has not launched here in Florida. They've launched some suborbital flights, taking like Michael Strahan, William Shatner up into space. Those have been launched from Texas. The next pad that we'll talk about as we head back a little bit is this white building there. That tall white building says ULA on the top and American flag on top of it, and then a couple of lightning towers. Do you see the orange part coming out the bottom of that pad? That is a Delta IV heavy rocket. That's the last one. Yeah, it is going to be launched sometime in March, and then it will be replaced by another rocket. When we assemble our rockets, they bring the rocket into a building, all different buildings for the different rockets. They assemble the rocket in the building. Then typically there's a certain type of vehicle that will carry the rocket from the building down to the launch pad. Well, over here at 37, they assemble the rocket inside the building like you can see it now. But when it comes time to launch, the rocket stays there and that whole building will move out of the way. So it's really cool. It's completely opposite how they do it everywhere else. We got a really nice clear day to see this now, because some days it's very foggy out here and you can't see anything. The next one we're going to pull up, but do you see those black tower and then the 4 lightning towers around that black tower with that white arm on it? And then just to the right of the black tower, there's like a black piece with a white top on top of it. That is the Falcon 9 that's going to launch this morning at 1:33. Yeah, the white part on top, that's called the fairing. Inside the fairing, that's, you know, the curved cone on the top, is the PACE satellite. Now, the reason the rocket looks so black underneath that is it's called a strong back crane. It's a black vehicle on 40, and it carries the rocket up to the launch pad, and then it brings it up into the vertical position. And the one they use on 40 is black, and so that's why it looks all black. The one on 39A, where they also launched the Falcon 9 from, is a white one. People ask, why is one white, why is one black? I have no idea. I'm guessing when they went to the Strongback Crane store, that's what they had in stock. The rocket would still look pretty dark because they don't repaint them. Okay, stage one which is the reusable part, they never repaint them. So stage two is always brand new, it's not reusable. And then the fairing on top is also reusable. Parachutes come out from that, falls in the ocean. But those don't take as much heat as the bottom stage. So they just at most look like an off-white. Now, the black tower that is to the left of the rocket is for astronauts. The astronauts will take an elevator up the tower. The white arm you see going across, that's called a crew access arm, also called a swing arm. And it'll swing up against the capsule. Then the astronauts go up the elevator, walk through the crew access arm into the rocket. The very last section of the crew access arm, on all of the crew access arms, is always called a white room. It's a sanitary room. Crew members help the astronauts there with any last minute details. What you're seeing there is brand new. We have not launched an astronaut from Cape Canaveral since October 11th. Of 1968. So the reason that they're building this new one here down on 40, are any of you familiar with SpaceX's big new rocket, the Starship? Have you heard of that? Okay, launched out of Texas. They've done 2 launches. Now, originally, it launched in April last year, but eventually it's going to be launching from Launchpad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. So on that April launch, you're probably familiar that when it did launch, it actually blew up the launch pad on Texas. So at that point, NASA said, okay guys, before you complete the new tower here on 39A, you need to build us a backup tower for astronauts down on 40. Because if you blow up 39A, we don't have any way of getting our astronauts up to the International Space Station unless we send them up with the Russian Soyuz capsule. And, you know, we always need a backup because the relationship with the Russians is, you know, like that most of the time. So I think they've completed it now. You know, it's just been finished in the last couple of weeks at the most, and they're hoping to get a manned launch from there sometime this spring. And then the last launch pad we see from here is to the left of that. There's another tall white tower, and then you can see another launch tower there. That one is launch pad number 41. Also used by ULA. They launched their Atlas V rocket from there. The Atlas V rocket is the one that launched the Perseverance rover up to Mars. Perseverance will be up there 3 years, February 18th. And the Perseverance rover, about 3 months ago, I think now, did an experiment and was actually able to create oxygen up on Mars. A little machine they called MOXIE, M-O-X-I-E, was able to create enough oxygen to keep a small dog alive. So they had a good proof of concept. So now when we go to Mars, that's a major breakthrough. So that'll be launching down there. But they launched another rocket in the beginning of January. This was a brand new rocket called the Vulcan rocket. And it's going to replace that Delta IV Heavy and then eventually the Atlas V. Much newer rocket, newer technology. So it's got more efficient, cheaper to operate, things like that. And it will be launching down there on launch pad number 41. Okay. 37 launch pad there is launch pad number 34. Way back now, January 27th of 1967, NASA's getting ready to launch its first Apollo capsule to test it. They're going to launch it on top of a Saturn 1B rocket. When you came in this morning, and you saw all the rockets in the rocket garden, there was one white one laying on its side. That's the Saturn 1B. So it's over there on launch pad 34. And they're doing a dress rehearsal. They're going to launch in a couple of weeks. The astronauts are inside getting familiar with the capsule. A couple of loose wires caused a spark. Fire broke out. The astronauts were unable to get out of the capsule. The hatch couldn't get it open. The 3 of them, Ed White, Roger Chaffee, and Gus Grissom, all died in that fire. So at that point, NASA shut the Apollo program down for 20 months. They basically rebuilt the Apollo capsule, made over 1,300 changes to it. Then they were ready to test it again after a couple of unmanned launches. October 11th, 1968, the last manned launch from Cape Canaveral was Apollo 7. And those Apollo 7 astronauts, they went up, successfully orbited the Earth. And then when they got back, we knew we were ready to go to the moon. You know how ready we were? 10 weeks later, we sent Apollo 8 to the moon with Jim Lovell, Frank Borman and William Anders. They orbited the moon on Christmas Eve. And during the Christmas Eve orbit, they broadcast back to Earth, and it became the most listened to broadcast in the history of man. 1 out of 4 people alive on that day heard the broadcast. They read from the book of Genesis about the creation of the Earth as they looked down on the Earth from the moon. So all that happened there. And after that, Apollo 8, like I said, launched from up on 39A, and then all of the manned launches have been up there since that point there. Wildlife here. We have, I think it's 22 American bald eagles nests. You'll see one on the way back later today. They'll slow down and point it out to you. But we've got bobcats, deer, gopher tortoises, wild boars, all sorts of things we see on a daily basis, and of course alligators. There are between 5,000 to 6,000 alligators on this property. Back in, I think it was late November, they sent someone out to do a count, see how many gators we have here, but we never heard back from the guy, so we were not sure what happened. When we headed down, there was one building I didn't talk about. There's a building between the two others. It is called the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building. In that building, in the back of it, is where they would get the Apollo capsules ready before they put them on top of the rocket. And you always think of the Apollo capsule as just being where the astronauts sit, but it's 3 pieces. The top piece, the pointy part, looks like a big pencil sitting on top, is part of the launch escape system. Then you have the capsule with the astronauts, and then below that, the service module. Those 3 pieces were all assembled inside of that facility right there. And we'll actually see a replica of the launch abort system that they use on Orion later on our tour. It's the same basic type of system. I'll point it out once we get a little bit closer exactly where you can see it. There that they put those capsules together. That's how much clearance they needed for it. And if you were to go in there today, first thing they chase you out. But inside of there right now is the Orion capsule number 4, which are getting ready to take us back to the moon in the next several years. The front part of the building, a lot of it's but up on the 3rd floor towards the right-hand side, they have apartments there for the astronauts. And the astronauts stay there for several days before their launch. And then on the launch day, they walk down a hallway after breakfast and they go into the checkout where there's a van there. It's called the Astro Van, about half the size of this bus. Maybe you've seen pictures where the astronauts, they all kind of wave and they get on the van. That happened right there. Once they're in the van, they come out of the parking lot onto this road here. And that means we're traveling on the same road down to the launch pads that all 12 of the men that walked on the moon traveled to get to their rockets. And after the space shuttle, 135 space shuttle crews, all of them same thing, stayed in the apartments, got on the Astrovan, took this route down to the launch pads. Currently, SpaceX, those are the guys launching our NASA astronauts and our international astronauts. They still stay in the apartments and they still take this same road down to the launch pads. One slight difference. SpaceX, that's Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is Tesla, so they don't drive in the Astrovan. They now go down in nice Teslas. So the ones with the nice gull wing doors that open up, pretty cool. The Artemis astronauts have a new vehicle made by a company called Canoe, an electric vehicle. Kind of looks like an egg laying on its side, kind of domed in the middle. Or if you had a Volkswagen Beetle and you kind of smashed it down the middle, elongated it, that's what it looks like. This road here that Jody just turned on is called Kennedy Parkway. So this connects the industrial area down to the assembly area. So a lot of rocket parts move up and down this road. And back in November of 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated, the very next day, his widow, Jackie Kennedy, wrote a letter to the new president, Lyndon Johnson, and asked that this area be named in his honor. 2 days later, President Johnson signed it into law, and this became the John F. Kennedy Space Center. So, also this road here, SpaceX, they either come in on the barge down by the cruise ships, or they land at Cape Canaveral. Either way, they bring them on a special flatbed truck up along the road. There's a beach road there. We'll see it later. And then they come up along that way onto this road that we're on now, and they turn down this road right where we are now and go into that white building there. See it behind the trees? That building is called Hangar X. And that's where SpaceX refurbishes all those Falcon 9 rockets. You see it again coming out on the other side here. You can have 8 or 10 of them in there at any time. There's a building behind it you might have saw that was black. That one is called X2. That's where they'll do the assembly of that Starship rocket when it starts coming over this way here. If you look at the road we're on a 2-lane road. The other side of the road there is 3 lanes. The reason is the rocket, no matter which way it's going, it travels on that side of the road because they need the 3 lanes. It's a wide load. So that's why they built that 3 lanes over there. This big white building that we're heading towards, this is the largest single-story building in the world. It's called the Vehicle Assembly Building, or VAB. The reason it's so large and only the 1 floor, that's where we put together all the big rockets. So the Saturn V, 363, Artemis will be 365, Space Shuttle, half the size of that, 183. But they're all assembled inside of this building here. We're going to make a turn and we're going to go past it. But when they had to start building this back in 1965, all this area, you see how close we are to the water. So it's kind of marshy, so they had to make sure the base could support the rockets. So they took 4,225 steel rods that were 160 feet long, which is 5 bus lengths. And they buried the rods down into the ground, into bedrock, and then they just kept pouring more and more cement till they built the base 6 feet above sea level. Took 1 year to do that. The second year, they built the rest of the whole building. It became operational in 1966. And the building's located 3.5 miles away from the Launchpad. The reason for that, they were afraid if the Saturn V rocket was out there and blew up, the blast area is 3 miles wide, so they had to keep everybody safe. And sometimes on these tours, things pop up. I had a lady sitting here about a month ago, and I'm telling her what I just told you, and she leans over to me, and she says, my father was the designer of the VAB. And yeah, during the tour, then she showed me all these pictures. And you know how architects, they make models when they're building the buildings? She showed me the picture of her father with the models, and she said all the models were done in her basement. It's pretty amazing, you know, the people you run into here. It's one of the really cool things to take into account. Now, as we're heading up too, you see the 2 gray stripes that come down the side of the building there? Those are actually doors. They call them high bay doors. We have 4 of them. 2 of them are here on the west side of the building, and the other 2 on the east side, and they are the largest doors in the world. They are 456 feet tall. When you open them up, it takes 45 minutes just to get them open, 45 minutes to close them. So if you're the guy at night that's got to lock up, it takes a while, you know. And the amazing thing about the doors, though, as they go up, each section falls in behind the previous section. That gives them the opportunity to open up any section of the door independently of the other doors. So it lets them let light and air in. And they always do that because if they keep this building closed up for too long a time, it creates its own weather patterns. And this sounds like I'm making it up, but it has actually rained inside of the building. Yeah, so the only place you'll ever hear, let's go outside and get out of the rain. Yeah. Now, it doesn't happen anymore because now they know how to control it and things like that. But back in the early days, that's what happened. The other thing you see up there is the American flag. And I've already told you it's the largest single-story building, largest doors. So there you go, largest American flag in the world as well. Each of the red and white stripes is 8 feet wide. So that is the width of the bus. So that means that bus could drive right up the flag. And the blue field that you see the stars are painted on, that is the size of an NBA basketball court. Each of the 50 stars is 6 feet across. And if they came to you one day and said, your job is to paint that flag and the NASA logo next to it, call in sick, because you need over 500 gallons of paint to do that, and you cannot use a spray gun. You're too high up, so it all has to be painted by hand. The first time it painted up there was in 1976 for the United States Bicentennial. They had the flag, and instead of the NASA logo up there, they had the big star was the logo for the bicentennial. The cranes is they fill the tank with water. They want to test it out beforehand. This over here, quickly, this is the press area. So when you ever watch a launch and you see the countdown clocks back out there by the American flag. These four structures right here, they made them out right behind the SpaceX Hangar X. These are part of a launch tower for the Starship rocket in Texas. They're building a second one. So, you see that big barge parked right there with the crane there? They're going to move all four of those pieces onto the barge, and then they're going to ship them out to Boca Chica, Texas. And they'll be part of the launch complex over there. All the big parts of the rockets that I told you come up the Banana River, that's where they come up, right where that crane is. It's called the turn basin. And they'll lift those big parts off, and then they put them inside the building. If you look back, you'll see a couple of doors there, the high bay doors. The door on the right is high bay number 3. That is where they'll put together all the Artemis rockets. Now, we assemble the rocket on the platform and the big tall tower, and all of that sits on big tall pedestals to keep the rocket off the ground. Now when the rocket's built, we carry it down to the launch pad. On the screens up above you, you see the crawler transporter. That's the vehicle that carries the rocket down to the pads. It is the heaviest self-propelled vehicle on Earth. It was certified that by Guinness World Records. It weighs over 6 million pounds. It can carry almost 20 million pounds. So when it comes out of that door, it comes down this crawlerway. See this gravel roadway out to your left? That's not a two-way street. That's one way. That's how wide the rocket is. 40 feet of gravel, 50 feet of grass, 40 feet of trench, 7 foot deep, all the way to the launch pads. Took a lot of sand, then compacted it, then top of that, they put limestone, and now the very top is 140 million pounds of Tennessee River rock. Tennessee River rock, they get it from Alabama. It has a very low iron content, which means it's a low sparking rock. They don't like sparks shooting up when you're hauling rockets. So when that vehicle brings the rocket out of that building to the launch pad, it takes somewhere between 10 and 11 hours. It's a long trip. That crawler travels at 0.4 miles per hour, 0.65 kilometers. So that's why it takes so long. They stop along the way, they have to refuel. Doesn't get great gas mileage. You're carrying 26 million pounds. You're not going to get good talent. But inside here, they have a restroom built into that vehicle. They also have a small kitchen, microwave, refrigerator. Here's the reason for that. If you look around, you're the crew carrying the rocket down. It's about a 14, 15-hour workday. There's nothing out here. So you got to use the restroom. You want to have lunch, you go right inside. You cannot leave the rocket, go off right now. Yeah, there it is. That's a real good picture of it right now. Now, when we launched Apollo, and now for the Artemis mission, we have that mobile launch platform with the big tower attached. But during the space shuttle, the tower was not attached to the platform. The tower was permanently based down on the launch pad. And the black tower you see we're heading towards there, that's the original launch tower that was used for 82 of our space shuttle launches. SpaceX modified it. Now it's what they use for their Falcon 9. You see the big crew access arm up top there as well. The taller tower to the right, that's the one that's under construction for the new Starship rocket. That is those pieces we just passed. That's what it'll look like when it's all completed in Texas. They have one of these, but they're building a second one now. So SpaceX, they bring stage 1 and 2 out of Hangar X down the roadway here on this special flatbed truck that they have, and then they bring it into that SpaceX hangar. In the hangar is where they attach the payload. The payload's the satellite, the capsule for the astronauts, or the capsule for cargo, whatever it may be. Now the rocket's still laying flat at that point. Then the strong back crane will carry it up the hill, and then when it gets up there, it'll put it up into the vertical position. And it doesn't look like the strong back is up there now. It looks like it's in the building. Over here to your right, this white hut. When we pass it, look in the door all the way to the right in the front corner. It's really tucked in, but there's a Crew Dragon capsule there, the type that takes the astronauts to the space station. It's coming into view now, so you really got to turn your necks, but you can see it all the way in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they make it very difficult for us to see it. So I got to talk to Elon. I think we're going to dinner Wednesday, so eventually. We're not going to dinner together. We're going 1,000 miles away. This is where SpaceX has their lunch. Now, the first thing that they teach those people, they said, don't get this confused. That's lunch, that's launch. That is, by the way, that's the oldest joke at NASA. It goes back to like 1958. So as we make this little turn here, you'll be able to look up the hill. You'll see the rails that strong back crane uses to get the rocket up to the top of the hill. Also a very good view of that crew access arm. All the way to the left, that black cutout is where the astronauts will walk through to get inside the rocket. The white stick on top is a lightning tower. That's all we need for this size rocket in the space shuttle is that lightning tower. Now, just to the right of that, you'll see a big water tower. It says SpaceX on it. And we do have the same water tower on Launchpad number 39B. That tower can hold 450,000 gallons of water. Now, moments before launch, they release the water onto the launch pad, and that dampens the vibration. You ever see an old movie of a rocket launch attempt in the 50s where the rocket goes up a little bit, turns sideways, and then it blows up? A lot of those were caused by the vibration of the rocket bouncing off the ground back into the rocket, throwing it off course. So they started using water. On the early rockets, they had water cannons, like you see now at water parks, just shooting the water on. Then they came up with this system for the bigger rockets. Also, what that means is when you watch a rocket launch, you see all that white smoke. That is not smoke. It's actually the steam from all of that water. Now, the new Starship rocket, once it does start launching from here, one of the amazing things of this rocket, once it launches, it will come right back and land at this very same tower. So that always, every time I say it, it sounds like. Right on the other side of this stop sign ahead of us is some sand dunes, and right on the other side of those, the Atlantic Ocean. The further south that you launch a rocket, the bigger the boost you get. The rotation of the Earth is out to the east, so we launch to the east. Closer to the equator, bigger boost. When we got into the rocket business, this was the southernmost part of the United States that fit all those criteria. Now, Jody's making a left-hand turn here.
There's something coming down here. So
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, if you made a right-hand turn.
Yeah, that would happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't look like a rocket to me. But, yeah, I was going to say, if she made a right-hand turn, she'd get in trouble. But the other thing that would happen, if she did go that way, about 1.5 miles or so down in that direction, is something called the Astronaut's Beach House. And a few days before their launch, they have a barbecue out there. They bring their families, they have a nice barbecue, and then at the end of the night, they have a champagne toast for their upcoming launch. Every champagne bottle from every launch with NASA astronauts is still in the beach house there. They're not just rolling around on the ground. They're in a nice display case, and they all have the mission patches to match it there. Unfortunately, we're not allowed in there. It's just a private place for the astronauts. So, if you look at the launch tower, and then you look to the other side, and you see the sand dune, you can see the methane. And one last time, look up at the black tower. Do you see all those wires coming off from the right-hand side? And see how they go way out, making their way down to the ground there? Those wires that you see are actually zip lines. Yeah, if something goes wrong and the astronauts don't have enough time to take the elevator to the ground, they go to the zip lines, they jump in a basket, and they zip line down to the ground. On the ground, there's a bunker. And then next to the bunker, an armored vehicle, several of them, with the back door left open, so the astronauts can go in the armored vehicle, close the door, drive away to safety. We've never had to use it. Hopefully we never will. Using that same zipline system for the Artemis missions as well. Even though it seems kind of basic, it's kind of one of those, if it's not broke, don't fix it ideas. But this is interesting. NASA doesn't like the astronauts to train on the zip lines. They told them it's too dangerous. They're launching you to the moon on a giant explosive, and you're okay with that, but somewhere along the line during your training you said, listen guys, can I try the escape system, just in case? And they're like, absolutely not, that's way too dangerous. So if you're ever somewhere and you see an activity that's offered is zip lining, remember, that's when NASA draws the line for danger. All right? Okay. All right, this is our first stop. This one's called the Remote AB Camera Stop. We use remote cameras out here, and it's called AB because we're halfway between launch pads A and B. And when we pull up, there'll be two billboards. One of them has the NASA logo. On the other side of that one, all of the mission patches from NASA launches off of 39A. The other billboard with the American flag, all the NASA mission patches from 39B. And the only place we can go here is right up this walkway or straight ahead where we have restrooms. They're porta potties, but they're the only restrooms on the tour, and they do keep them clean. Okay, we're going to be out here for about 10 to 15 minutes. Everyone up top usually asks me how come they only use remote cameras here. So I'll tell everyone, if you were out here during a launch during Apollo, Space Shuttle, or Artemis, the vibration from the rocket would stop your heart and kill you. So that's why they use the remote cameras. All right, I'll see you outside.
This is Space Center. 然后这边这是大西洋，后面就是这个 Space Center 发射场，发射场就在这儿，两个主要的发射场。是美国航天局 NASA 总部肯尼迪这个航天中心的两个主要发射场，这是一个旁边发射场就在大西洋旁边，离大海都能看得见的很近，走都能走到的地方。这是第一个，这个是第二个，总算到这儿了。好，那么大家看，这个就是美国宇航局总部肯尼迪航天中心的两个发射架，大家看了吧？这是一个，这是一个发射架，它离大海就是走路的距离，走路就到大海旁边，然后呢，它第二个发射架在这儿，也是在跟前，离得不远。你看，这是第二个发射架，第二个发射架也是走路就到大海里，为什么呢？就是他希望这个航天的器一飞起来就到海里飞，就是掉下来掉海里，不要掉到地上，那麻烦就大了。
Something had gone wrong. The system will only work for 3.5 minutes. After that, we're too high up in the atmosphere, parachutes won't work. On our next stop outside the vehicle assembly building, we do have a replica of that Orion launch abort system. On Orion, it's a button. There was a lever, now it's a button. And it's a well-hidden button, so not something you can accidentally hit there. Off to your left, down there on the ground, that little white tripod you saw in the front of the bus, that is part of the field mill system. 31 tripods like that around Kennedy and Cape Canaveral. The field mill system helps to detect lightning. And that's important because Central Florida is the lightning capital of North America. And when we launched our first men to land on the moon, that was in July of 1969, Apollo 11. 4 months after that, we launched Apollo 12 in November from 39A, right in front of you here. On that day in November, it was a lousy day. It was overcast, it was drizzling, raining. 1 minute after Apollo 12 launched, they were struck by lightning. There were no field mill systems. We had no idea what happened. The astronauts didn't know, but they lost some of their guidance system and some of their screens went out. They were calling down to mission control, trying to figure it out. 20 seconds later, they were struck by lightning a second time. All their screens went out. All the guidance went out. They had less than 2 minutes at that point to decide what to do to abort the mission. And Pete Conrad, who is the commander of Apollo 12, he grabbed the lever for the launch abort system, and he had his hand tightly wrapped around the lever. Now, I know his hand was tightly wrapped around the lever because I've actually heard Pete Conrad say, my hand was tightly wrapped around the lever. He was ready to abort. But before he did, there was a specialist, an econ specialist at Mission Control, and he remembered a scenario. They always run these scenarios on the countdowns, practice ones. He remembered one from the previous year, and he said to the flight director, try SCE to aux. There was a switch labeled SCE, throw it to auxiliary. So they called up to Apollo 12 and they said, Apollo 12, try SCE to aux. And the astronauts quickly responded, what the heck is that? Well then, Alan Bean, who was sitting on the right-hand side of the capsule, and remember, they're on their back going up, he said, oh, I know where the switch is. It was back above his right shoulder. He reached back, he threw SCE to aux, and everything reset, and Apollo 12 successfully made it to the moon and back. Over 400,000 people were involved in getting us to the moon, yet one man saved Apollo 12. And that same guy, who you never heard of, maybe John Aaron, he was the main person responsible for getting Apollo 13 home safely after the accident. And he was interviewed when everyone got home, and they asked him a question along the lines of, what would you have done if everything you tried didn't work? And his response, failure is not an option. Now, try and get through our gift shop without seeing that, with a hat, a coffee mug, or a shirt or something. Like they go-to catchphrase if they're stuck on something. So pretty amazing. We're coming up now. This is the base of the Launchpad number 39B. 53 space shuttles launched from this launch pad. Apollo 10 launched from this pad, only Apollo mission to launch from here. Also, January 28th of 1986, the Challenger launched from this pad right here. And then 72 seconds after liftoff, we had the failure. The mobile launch platform you see out there was used for Artemis 1. It'll be used for Artemis 2 and 3 as well. The reason it's out here is they did modifications. Artemis 1 blew the elevator doors off the tower. They've done modifications. They've been testing the modifications by doing water dumps. Also, if you look to the left, you see the zip lines coming out. 2 weeks ago tomorrow, they tested the zip lines for the very first time, and they'll do a couple more tests on those. These are actually higher up than on the other launch pad. These, though, will not stay permanent because we got to bring this one back into the building to assemble the rocket sometime later on in the spring. And so they will disassemble them, lay them on the ground, and then hook them back up later on. This building here we're passing, it has automatic doors, like when you go in a supermarket. A couple of years ago, a woman's in her office working, minding her own business. Here's a big commotion down the hallway, goes outside to see what's going on, and there's a big alligator walking down the hall towards her. Yeah. They adjusted the doors now, so you got to be a certain height before they'll open for you. I know this group's from all over the place, but if any of you back here when you see Artemis 2 is back on the pad, think about taking this tour again, because we pull into this parking lot right here where Jody's pulling in, and nobody can get closer to a moon rocket than we get right here today. And it's truly amazing. I was out here every day when Artemis was here, and it's really, really amazing. The only thing is, once you get to 48 hours before launch, then we can't come out. That's when the countdown starts. But before that, it is really amazing. You got the liquid oxygen tank over here on your left. To your right, there are two tanks, both liquid hydrogen. The one closest to the pad is brand new. They haven't used it yet. They only completed it right after the Artemis 1 mission. Also, you get a sense of the hill. And we have to bring the rocket up the hill there. And how we accomplish that is the crawler vehicle that was up on the screen. The hydraulics on it, the back end goes up, keeps the rocket level going up the hill. And the crawler drivers told us if they put a golf ball up on top, it won't roll in any direction. That's how precise that vehicle is taking that up the rocket. So it really is an amazing thing to watch. We're good, Joe.
All right, I've got traffic.
Okay.
Yeah, it's rush hour.
Now, the Artemis 2 mission is scheduled for September of 25, so 18, 19 months away. The 4 astronauts were already chosen. Christina Koch, she will be a mission specialist. A Canadian astronaut named Jeremy Hansen will also be a mission specialist. Victor Glover will be the pilot. Reed Weissman, the commander. Those 4 people, they will be going deeper into space than humans have ever traveled before. They're going to orbit the moon, but a much wider orbit than we used during Apollo. And when they get back after the 10-day, when we do walk on the moon in 2.5 years, first person of color and the first woman to walk on the moon. That could be actually the same person. They haven't chosen those astronauts yet. But after that, it gets even more exciting because Artemis 4 will launch a small space station called the Gateway. The Gateway is going to orbit the moon. And then the Orion capsule will dock with the Gateway, take another vehicle back and forth to the moon. And while they go back and forth, they'll be building a permanent base up on the moon. So a handful of years we'll be up living on the moon there. One thing we're going to see, we're passing some buildings up here on the left. And you got to look quickly because we don't stop here, but we just slow down a little bit.
I don't have any cars. I'll
No, it's just, yeah. Okay, just past this building, if you look down the road, just past the building here, you get a beautiful view down to Launchpad number 39A. See how it goes right there? That is the road that the armored vehicles would take if there was trouble up there. They get in there, drive that armored vehicle out of town up to this road, then take this road up back out of danger. So that's how they would do it right there. Anyway, once we do get that gateway built and they build the permanent base on the moon, one of the things they'll be doing is stockpiling some supplies up there. And the reason we want supplies is that Artemis is not really a mission to the moon. Artemis is NASA's mission to Mars. So when we're ready to go to Mars, a dozen years, thereabouts, that same Orion capsule docks with the Gateway, they load up the supplies, and then they head to Mars. It is now estimated just over a 2-year trip, almost a year traveling each way. You want to spend time once we get there finally. And also, you have to wait till Mars and the Earth are in a certain alignment before you can come home. At its closest distance to Earth, it takes 13 minutes right now to communicate with Mars. At its furthest distance, 43 minutes. So that means if you're up on Mars and you called down and said, Houston, we have a problem, you got to wait 43 minutes for the response. Yeah, and you just hope it's not, I'm sorry, what'd you say? But good news on that horizon. About 3 weeks ago, NASA successfully tested the first laser transmission of audio with the space station to Earth. So that could be a major breakthrough that will shorten all of that time. So all that type of stuff is being worked on. McDonnell Douglas about 4 months ago was given a contract to start working on a nuclear-powered rocket, and that could change all that timeline as we go along as well. When we do get up to this next stop at the VAB, there is a crew access arm like those, but the one that we'll see at the VAB is the actual one that 82 of the space shuttle crews walked to get into the space shuttle right there off of 39A. And not only are you going to see it, you'll be able to walk through it as well. Through the arm, into the white room, and then imagine stepping onto the shuttle. The only thing is you're going to see arrows painted on the ground. Walk in the opposite direction of the arrows. That's the escape arrows. If they were inside, they had to get their way to the elevator or the zip lines. That's where they would take it. Now, the turn basin that we passed earlier on, back in the fall, one day we're coming down this road and someone says to me, what's that thing in the turn basin? And I don't know what she's talking about because I sent a text to someone that works in the launch control room. I said, what's that capsule? And he said, it's a test capsule. They were dropping it in the water for 10 days, upside down, sideways, every which way, to test the buoyancy of the capsule. And then they did all the analysis to make sure, it was performing the way it did. And then they shipped it out to San Diego, gave it to the Navy, and then the Navy is practicing doing the recovery of the Artemis 2 astronauts. They put 2 scuba people inside so they can really duplicate everything that will be happening. If something goes wrong, the scuba people can get out because they have all the gear on. But later that day, I went out to take a look at the capsule because, you know, why wouldn't you? And when I got up there, there's a decal this big next to the door of Darth Vader. So I'm like, all right, who's in charge here? I found the guy. I said, what's with the Darth Vader decal? And he said they had to put red beacons around the capsule in case it's a night landing and something went wrong, they couldn't find the capsule. The red reflects the best off the water. So when they had the beacons on, they turned the lights out, they said it looked like Darth Vader's helmet. So they started calling the capsule Vader, and then they got the big decal and put it on. That's what they gave to the Navy. So now heading up this way too, just off to the left-hand side of the vehicle assembly building, you're going to see a room coming off on an angle with 4 sets of windows. That's called the Launch Control Center. That's mission control here in Florida. That's where we launch the rockets from. 4 sets of windows, 4 different firing rooms to launch rockets from. We're using firing room number 1 for all the Artemis missions. That's the one closest to the building. Artemis 2, like I said, September 25, they've already done 5 simulated countdowns inside that room. Every time they do the countdown, they throw different scenarios at them so they'd be prepared in case something goes wrong, just like with John Aaron. And the last countdown they did, which I think is about 3 weeks ago now, they brought the countdown all the way down to 4 seconds, which is what the plan was. Sometimes they bring them down to 2 hours, or depending on what they are trying to accomplish with that particular simulated countdown. So they're already working on that. They think they'll start assembling the rockets sometime early this summer. So that mobile launch platform, they're guessing, is going to be out there till about June. They don't need it before that, but they could bring it back in early. All of us that work here, we're hoping they leave it out there because it's a cool thing to see. Much easier than saying, yeah, in that building is this other thing. So all of that's pretty cool. We're hoping it stays out there for a while. This building over there to your right with the blue mural painted on it, inside of there is Boeing's new Starliner capsule. Going to launch April 14th, sending astronauts up to the space station. And if everything goes well, it will join SpaceX and the Russian Soyuz in sending our astronauts back and forth. That one's pretty interesting because it's going to be landing in the desert of New Mexico, not splashing down in the ocean. Big airbags will come out. The building that it's used right now was originally built for the Space Shuttle program, along with 2 other buildings we'll see over on the other side here. They're called Orbiter Processing Facilities, OPF. Space Shuttle, you can see them now, the white buildings with the blue bands around the top. Those 3 buildings, they would bring the shuttle in after its mission, take the engines out, refurbish them, get the payloads ready for whatever the next payload would be. Pieces of the space shuttle, satellites, science experiments, whatever they need, all be done in there. Then from those buildings, they tow them into the VAB and start stacking it with the rest of the rocket. This right here we're pulling up to, this is the top of the rocket on Artemis, the launch abort system. There it is right there. Then this white piece here, this is the actual white room and the crew access arm. 82 space shuttle crews use that actual structure right there. The lime-colored vehicle is the armored vehicle that was on the bottom of the zip lines. We have a newer, more modern vehicle that they use for that now, but that's one of them. Also, when you're out there, you'll see a semi-looking American flag painted down on the ground. The reason for the flag, it's painted to the scale of the big flag up on the window. So 8-foot stripes, 6-foot stars. And we're going to be out here 10 minutes or so as well. So everybody knows where we keep it. But they launched it back up into orbit this, late December. And we don't know what it's doing up there. It went higher up than it ever went before. So we have no idea what it's doing. And that's the top secret part. A year ago, January, one day, we're out on our bus tour and we got an email, Jody and I and everybody that works here, saying no bus tours tomorrow, like we're doing now. Nobody's coming in. Apollo Saturn V Center will be closed and nobody can come in. And we're wondering what the heck is going on. The next day in the morning, we woke up, there was a sonic boom, and it was the X-37B landing here after about 300 days up in space. Yeah, they didn't want anybody, out here when it did land. And then, back in the summer, one day, in the middle of the day, we got a same type of a letter saying all bus tours the rest of the day are canceled, just because they opened the door there.
Yep.
But there was already one bus that was out here when that happened, so they got to see. And they're saying that someday they'll get to see their families again, but they don't have a timetable on that. But yeah, they take it very serious. It actually looks like a very small space shuttle, very small. And it lands out here on the space shuttle landing field as well. During these years that we've done the space exploration, we've gotten a lot of products. You're probably familiar with some of them. WD-40 that you use around the house for hundreds of things came from the Atlas rocket. Scratch-resistant eyeglasses, that came from the visors the men wore up on the moon. It's pretty cool. Same with memory foam mattresses and pillows. That came from what they would sit on as they would splash down. The material for invisible braces was developed up in space. Water filters in our refrigerators, CAT scans, the thermometers that we can take our temperature at the doctor down about 2 seconds, really quick, beats the alternative, right? Those were developed up in space. Cordless power tools, so all the cordless vacuums and everything we use came from space. Oh, we got a gator. Yeah, good spot, laying right on the side there.
I'm gonna try to make sure. There's another one up underneath the.
看，贝贝，看，鳄鱼。
哇，这么小。
Oh, there's another one on the piping.
Yeah, underneath, straight back.
Oh, underneath.
There.
Yeah. Yeah. On the right-hand side, right on top of that pipe there.
嗯，是看见了吧？哎，那不是鳄鱼吗？
那个小的。
嗯，但是还有一个大的我没看见。
Yeah. By the way, too, we always point out that this isn't Disney, and those aren't animatronics. Okay? Those are real ones. They also work as part of our security system. Yeah, they all have little badges on. But all these great products have come. Now, this crawler vehicle that we see up on the screens today, it is inside the vehicle assembly building. It's crawler number 2, the one we use, but crawler number 1 is actually out here. They look identical. The only difference, crawler number 2 had an upgrade to carry the heavier rocket. They've not yet upgraded the other crawler. We'll see it in just a minute. Oh, back here on those OPF buildings, see where it says number 2? That's part of the garage door, and the tail for the shuttle would go through that slot there. All right, right on the other side of this building, here we go. There's crawler number 1. So they both look identical. You can see how large they are. 2 tracks on each corner. That's a mobile launch platform from the space shuttle. No tower. The shuttle was just sitting straight up on that, just like that there. Now, we had the 135 space shuttles. Launches 78 landed here at the Kennedy Space Center. The other ones that landed were out at Edwards Air Force Base, one at White Sands, New Mexico. They would be flown back here on top of a 747 jet, like a big piggyback ride. They land, all of them, out at the shuttle landing strip. It's a 3-mile-long runway. It's over there to your left where that white curved roof is. That's the end of the shuttle landing strip. And once it did land, they would have to tow it. And they towed it down this road here, off to the left. They cleverly named it the towway. They tow it down there, onto this road, and then into the OPF buildings to get ready for the next flight. So, we are going to be at the Apollo Saturn V Center in just about 2 minutes or so. At this point, they always ask me to remind you, gather all your belongings, make sure you don't leave anything on the bus. It's really amazing, even with this announcement, how many cell phones that we find on the bus when people get off. Saturday afternoon, a lady had left a very expensive designer jacket on the bus. Now, luckily, it fit my wife perfect, but the idea is just make sure you have all your stuff with you, okay? There's a couple of other things we'll point out. At the back end of the Saturn V Center, they have grandstand bleach, and they always do manage to sell it out, especially when it's included. So it is the closest a visitor can watch the launch from, and it's really a great place to watch a launch. If you're ever back here and you go on the website and you see upcoming launches, it will tell you where the viewing areas are from. And they give you 2 attempts. So if you do spend $70 for a ticket and it is scrubbed for whatever reason, you do get admission back for whenever they do that second launch. So after that, though, you're out of luck. And that's just how it is launching rockets. Yeah, it is the most amazing. As Jody makes this left-hand turn here, you'll get a really good view as we go through the back of the bleachers here. Yeah, right on the other side of this restroom here, there's a 39A. Look at that, flat straight across. You can see the rocket sitting there. Then to the left is B. That black trailer there, out of the top of it comes a big Jumbotron video screen, so you get to see it on the launch pad. Someone like myself does commentary about the launch and the rocket itself. You can see how close we are right here to 39B. So it's really, really cool place. You really feel it, and you can hear the rumble and feel it right through your chest as the rocket launches. The last thing we're going to see here, as Jody makes this turn, is called the Moon Tree Garden. The trees that go around this garden came from seeds that went to the moon. Stuart Roosa, Apollo 14 astronaut, brought seeds with him up to the moon to do an experiment. This is the second generation of trees from that experiment. And around the circle there, you'll see all these pedestals. Each pedestal is about one of the Apollo launches. So if you want to go read about it and see all that, you come out the back door of the Saturn V Center, take you right here. So this is the end. Jody's going to pull around in a second. We'll drop you off. But I always like to sum everything up, at the end before I do let you go. And I thought about what's a good way to sum this all up, and I couldn't come up with anything, I'll be honest. But luckily, I thought of something President Kennedy said. And so this is a little bit of what he said back in 1962. He said, "We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they're easy, but because they are hard. In short, our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as to others require us to make this effort to solve these mysteries and to solve them for the good of all men." He said, "We set sail on this new sea because there's new knowledge to be gained, there are new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. And everything NASA has ever done has benefited all people, all of humanity, not just those of us living in the United States." And Jody and I, we feel very proud to be a small part of that, taking you on tours, talking about our history, what we have planned for the future. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, at the end of the day, when you're ready to go back, you'll exit out through the gift shop. Last thing I leave you with, remember, out here at the Kennedy Space Center, we believe that the sky is not the limit. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Big U-turn, and they come back in here, and they dock with the lunar lander, and then they slowly pull it out of that sheet. And now, the CSM and the lunar lander head out into lunar orbit. Now, we don't need these two pieces anymore, but we're too high up, we can't drop them in the ocean. So on the early missions, we sent them on a trajectory to orbit the sun. After Apollo 12, we would deliberately crash them into the surface of the moon. Apollo 12 put seismic readers on the moon, and now by crashing these pieces, we got some very good scientific data about the moon. So now, the CSM and the lunar module, they're going around the moon, they get to the back side of the moon, and 2 out of the 3 astronauts get inside the lunar lander. 1 astronaut stays behind. He will continue to orbit the moon while the other 2 come down. Now, talk about this lunar lander a little bit. What you see right here, this is a real lunar lander. This vehicle was scheduled to land on the moon on Apollo 15. Well, Apollo 15, they got the rovers ready faster than they thought. This one was not equipped to hold the rover on the outside, so they used a different one. That turned out to be a break for us, because now we got a real one to look at. And there are 2 parts of this lunar lander. This top part here, that's gray and black, that's called the ascent stage. And the shiny mylar part, that is the descent stage. Each piece has their own rocket engine. You wonder how thick that gray and black panel is? If you took that's how thick it is. side was facing the sun, the other side wasn't. So one side would get very hot and the other side would be very cold. So they rolled it as they went to keep it evenly temperatured. Now, as they come around the moon, the astronauts are ready. They fire the descent engine. It sends them heading down towards the moon's surface. Once they got about 50,000 feet above the moon, they fired the engine a second time. That flipped the vehicle into the upright position we see in it now, and they start to come down for their landing. The astronauts themselves, one is looking out through this window, the other one through this window here. They are standing up inside, no room for seats, very small area, and what they're looking at is a level piece of ground to land on. If they land on a bad angle, game over. They'll never get back up into orbit to come home. So they gotta land up and down so they can get back up into orbit. So once they find that spot, they come down, touchdown, we're on the moon. The astronauts will come out this hatch door here, walk down this ladder right there, and then the first thing they always did was plant the American flag. After that, they went about the business of the mission. Our first time on the moon, Apollo 11, we were only on the moon for several hours. Our last time on the moon, we were on the moon for just over 3 days. And when I say our last time, I mean last time so far, okay? Now, when they're all done, they bring the rocks and their experiments back in the hatch along with themselves, and they're ready to go home. First thing they had to do was flip a switch. That would arm the rocket engine for the ascent stage. Now when they're ready to go, they flip another one, up they go, lunar orbit, they rendezvous and dock with the command and service module, they get inside with all the rocks and everything, they cut this vehicle loose, and it crashes down into the surface of the moon, and now we're heading home. As they come around the back of the moon again, they fire the engine on the service module, takes us heading back to Earth. 2.5 days to get back home. It's a little bit faster because the gravity starts taking over as we get closer. We get faster. We hit Earth's atmosphere. The command and service modules separate. The service module falls through the sky and burns up. Now, the capsule with the astronauts, that's flowing also like a brick, but it has a heat shield along the back and the sides protecting it. So parachutes will come out, slowing it down. Then eventually a second set of parachutes slows it down to about 20 miles per hour, splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. Then it's recovered.
We're standing by for Eagle. Okay, coming along. Yeah, my controllers, we're off to a good start. Right? AOS left. Roger, AOS left. Here's the Eagle, how do you read? Bye-bye, Eagle, we're standing by for your burn report, over. Roger, the burn was on time.
As soon as the Eagle reappears, things begin to go wrong. Radio communications break down. Messages to Eagle must be relayed through Mike Collins aboard the command module Columbia. Throughout the crucial final checks, contact with the Eagle keeps dropping out. And Flight Director Gene Kranz inches closer to aborting the mission. With the vital computer links temporarily holding, the moment of decision is now.
Okay, all flight controllers, don't go for landing. Let's go. Go, I don't go. 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 Southbound. Go. Inspeed. Econ. Surgeon. Go. Capcom, we're go for landing. Eagle, get to your go for landing. Over. Okay, go for landing. Go. All state of flight.
Hurtling toward the moon at 3,800 miles per hour, Neil Armstrong notices his checkpoints are all appearing too soon. This means a serious navigation error. At these speeds, 3 seconds long means missing the safe landing zone by 3 miles. Suddenly, the computer starts firing maneuvering thrusters, jolting the ship back and forth. This has happened in simulations, but never this much, never this violent. The smooth descent is becoming a bumpy ride. Before that is fixed, a problem with the onboard computer.
The 1202, 1202 alarm.
The astronauts have rehearsed for thousands of possible malfunctions, but not this one. It had been considered too unlikely. Seconds seem like hours as everyone struggles to remember the meaning of a 1202 program alarm. The deadline to safely abort is vanishing fast.
What is the reading on the 1202 program alarm?
1202 means the Eagle's onboard computer is overloading. This means Houston is blind, unable to make navigation corrections or interpret the data coming from Eagle's computer. Armstrong and Aldrin are on their own. Mission Control decides they can go ahead.
We're going this way. We're going that line.
If the data link doesn't fail again.
We're going that alarm.
1,000 feet, and Neil Armstrong can see that the computer is proposing to put them down in a dangerous place. That landing site is full of boulders. If they land there, they will never take off again. At 350 feet, Armstrong ignores his computer navigation and veers away from the rocky landing site with no time to explain to Mission Control.
Okay, I'll flight control everything tight.
In Mission Control, everybody is stunned. At 300 feet, the Eagle has left its flight plan and taken off at full speed across the face of the moon.
Eagle Houston, it's D-10-2, fuel, monitor, over.
90 seconds of fuel remaining. Now less than 200 feet, and the Eagle is too low to safely abort back into orbit. They call this part of the flight plan Dead Man's Curve.
No level, no level.
All that's left for Mission Control is to read off the fuel remaining in seconds.
60 seconds. 60 seconds.
The entire moon landing has come down to 2 men and 1 minute.
Forward. Forward. Put your feet down, 2.5. After 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Lights on. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Make shadow. More forward. More forward, drift to the right hole. Down 1/2. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Tranquility base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, tranquility. We got the unit.
A short time later, history is made again.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
For one incredible moment, we are one people with one history, watching our destiny unfold.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It was a moment shared by an entire world.
Here, man, from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the earth. It came indeed for all mankind.
With these first steps, mankind stood on the highest ground, and we saw our planet as our home port in the endless ocean of space.
There was something which was surprising to me that occurred as I was standing on the surface. Just after we had landed, I'd gone down, standing on the surface and looking at planet Earth for the first time, seeing the beauty, seeing the finiteness of it, the limits of it, and realizing what a shame it was that people were confronting each other on that planet without realizing what it was doing to the planet. It was a very emotional moment for me. I actually shed a couple of tears. Something totally unexpected for an engineer fighter pilot to be crying quietly up there in the moon.
Mankind had achieved a tenuous foothold in the heavens, and a new and exciting world lay waiting to be explored. The first mission had stayed for only 1 day, but over the next 3.5 years, 5 more Apollo missions visited the moon, and with each one, we stayed longer, roamed further, and discovered more.
I never thought when I was a kid building rockets, in high school, that we would go to the moon, before the end of the century. I mean, I thought that was something that was way in the future, fantasy.
I was rolling on the moon one day. In a very early month of December, day. I get the size of that rock. That is the best example we got. Just don't stub your toe.
We've got to understand that as a people, we need to stretch. We need to reach beyond our grasp. We need to strive to do things that seem impossible, because in the accomplishment of them, we move society forward.
Perspective that they see the mountains that we couldn't see. And so what we consider impossible, they're dreaming.
3, 2, 1. What a ride, what a ride.
When I have a chance to talk to kids, I tell them, the first thing I tell them is to take the word impossible out of their vocabulary. Go to their teacher tomorrow morning and scratch it out of the dictionary. The word doesn't exist. If I can stand here and tell you that I lived on the moon, that I called the moon my home for 3 days, you tell me what is impossible in this day and age, much less in a generation that follows, much less into the 21st century. Nothing is impossible.
I like exploring things, inventing. I would like to go up there, find out what's real.
I would like to be an astronaut. I like to design rockets.
Payload specialist.
Figure out controls. The thing that my mom can't understand is I'm terrified of heights, but I want to be an astronaut.
There's so many things I'd love to do. I would explore and look for everything.
I would try to start a farm.
Millions of other galaxies that you might be able to live in.
Stay unknown. Anything's
You
possible.
may be able to cure certain diseases.
I used to dance like play basketball, but it would still be short because then you could like fly up in the air. Baseball would be awesome. Hit the ball and you hit a home run every time.
There are a lot of things that would benefit mankind that we, because of science, we simply cannot do on Earth.
It's such a big universe, and it's kind of strange to think that just this one tiny planet was chosen to have life on.
I hear they're finding new planets or moons and finding out more about how stars are working, and it makes me feel like it's trying to tell me something.
What's it trying to tell you?
That you belong up there with them.
The Apollo program ended in December of 1972, but our journey into space is just beginning. I'm Neil Armstrong. The future of space travel is being written right now in the dreams and imaginations of a new generation. Perhaps that's the greatest legacy of Apollo. It shows our children and grandchildren courage, imagination, and the will to explore. No dream is impossible.
亲爱的观众听众，大家看，这里就是那个登月的这个火箭啊，你看那个人，哎呦，人多么小，火箭多么大，这个直径大概有一个篮球场、排球场那么粗。你看人站在火箭下面，像个小老鼠啊，像个很小的动物一样。它多长呢？大家看，这家伙像个足球场一样长啊！像你看人在底下多么渺小，像足球场一样长，像篮球场一样大。你看人在底下走着就这么小一点点啊！这阿波罗的登月的这个火箭啊，刚才还看了个电影，这就是阿波罗的那个可能是登月舱吧？你看这登月舱，这是啊，1972年他们又拿这个登月了啊。登月的是登月舱，确实是登月舱，这是登月舱里面的实际情况啊，这是登月舱的原件，返回舱说错了啊，返回舱的原件，返回舱的原件啊，
why don't you push that button down there in front of you?
然后这是一个什么多少期的电影大家看这多粗的这个人在底下多小，火箭他妈多大呢？你看这人多小，哎呀，游客，这是个什么电影登月电影你看人这么小，火箭这么大，没办法，在这儿人都这个感觉视觉都有点那个什么了都小人大火箭
Sending crews to the ISS. Boeing's spacecraft, the CST-100 Starliner, has also undergone orbital flight tests in order to send crews to the space station. It's able to seat up to 7 astronauts and cargo. Starliner launched atop an Atlas V rocket, made by United Launch Alliance, or ULA, upon its return to Earth rather than splashing down in the ocean. The Commercial Crew Program is allowing private companies to design in a more efficient and cost-effective way, while NASA engineers offer oversight and expertise. While these companies focus on providing transportation services to and from low Earth orbit, NASA is freed up to focus on deep space missions.
Kennedy Space Center is surrounded by the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. While the refuge in total takes up 140,000 acres, NASA only occupies about 7,000 acres. Other than the few launch pads and facilities you see spotted across the horizon, this area remains a refuge for 150,000 species of plants and animals. I want to introduce you to Becky Bolt, who has been a NASA wildlife ecologist here at KSC for nearly 35 years. Becky, what kind of wildlife can we expect to see here today?
We have lots and lots of different kinds of wildlife. We have over 400 species that occur out here on the Space Center. Look in the ditches and you'll see lots of wading birds, tall herons, egrets, ibises. There's several species of those, and I can pretty much guarantee you're going to see some of those. We have bobcats, raccoons, all kinds of animals.
Now, what is your role as a wildlife ecologist?
One of the main things we do is support operations. So people always think, oh, that's launch. Well, Kennedy Space Center is big and we have a lot of employees. It's like a city. We have lots of roads, we have lots of buildings. And so there's lots of maintenance and construction. So anything that might impact the habitat or wildlife, we have to go out and we check it out. And we work with the project managers to make sure that animals aren't harmed. Gopher tortoises are notorious for this. They go places where they shouldn't be, and sometimes we have to move them. We also support launches. We do a lot of research because we help the land managers, which on Kennedy Space Center, the land managers of the Fish and Wildlife Service, because this is a wildlife refuge. We have federally listed scrub jays and federally listed beach mice. There's probably some watching this right now.
这个2020年的时候呢，美国跑到火星上去，这个就是他在火星上面这个机械，它这个机械跑到火星上去，这么大一个东西在上面干嘛？我还没看清楚。low battery， 跑到火星上去了。这个也是他们在火星上的什么东西。然后Exploration Vehicle， 这是他在火星上的车，火星上的车头。这个是在火星上的一个真实的一个，说是在火星上跑的车。你看是这个样子的车，在火星上跑的车。这也是一个车，两个车，都是2020年在火星上跑的车。 火星上火星上跑的这个直升飞机，这是火星上面跑的车，跟一个普通的小汽车差不多大。这是一个小的火星馆，这个就是他们在那个火星上面干什么事儿在火星上面干什么事儿？这个是在火星上面发射。这是到火星要走几个月，待1年，回来又需要几个月。然后这儿有一个上火星的这个视频，就讲上火星是怎么回事儿就是到火星上要比到一般的这个太空火箭要大得多。你看这一般的太空火箭这么大，然后那么上火星呢就需要一个大得多的一个这么大，你看大得多的这个装燃料推进器过来这是那个再装几个小的喷头，再装一个发动机用最大的推力，这一个1、2、3、4、5、6、7这捆绑，把一堆火箭绑在一起然后这是人，最后人坐在这上面，装在这上面，我的妈呀，那这就是整个火箭打上去1/20、1/30是人待的地方这就上了火星了。这是2022年他们确实上了，美国上火星了，说错了，2020年美国上火星。那么今天在佛罗里达的这个肯尼迪航天中心，美国航天局总部就基本结束了。现在刚刚离开，天也快黑了，就是在大海，在这个大海旁边。它这个航天中心就在一个大海的角上，整个是大海，直的路两边都是大海，夕阳西下，浓云密布，热带风光，这个绿树青草。但是好像有不好的消息，就是听说国内这股市跌到2600了。哎呀，真是这个全世界不同风光希望国内的经济早点好起来，股市早点上来要这个问题成绩讲够，问题讲透这个无非是个7000人大会嘛，反正离饿死3000万人还差得远嘛，是吧？好好干，前途光明。那么非常感谢我们过去、现在、将来一贯拥护2个确立，谢谢大家，下期再见。大海风光。